gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11 once again. I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me, as always, Zach Bartle. Zach, what's going on, dude?
Man, I'm feeling it, the awe, the awe of the presence of the godfather of the program and his might and his TMJ.
And, of course, that is in reference, if you listened last week, to Mr. Greg Dutcher back in the house. Greg, what's going on, man?
What's up, homies? I thought you were, when I heard the presence and the might, I thought you were either talking about Steve Hartland or the Reverend James King. So, Zach, the fact that you would accord me that honor is great, man.
Well, Greg, you know that the Reverend King paid Zach a little visit when he first came on.
Oh, yeah, I think I heard about that, man.
It was a high
list
of honors.
He probably eviscerated you, right? But, dude, he did it in the love of Jesus. Everything King does is in the love of Jesus, so you can take it as a gracious act, but yeah.
Well, and just to be acknowledged, and by such a figure, it'd be, like in the world of politics, if say Donald Trump were to call and leave you an angry voice.
Yeah, that's right, dude. Exactly, man. Yeah. Hey, has Trump ever called into this cast, Nathan?
I don't know. I'm sure we could arrange something of that nature.
That would be awesome, man. Maybe he could talk
grief,
about
you're
the
both
summit.
Eating.
Right?
Are you both eating?
We are.
Zach, I drove through Dunkin' Donuts and I got you a bagel. Then I realized you're not actually in the room with us, so I'm going to eat that for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's how I serve, man. I serve people.
Now, in Maryland, are you guys like Dunkin' Donuts instead of Starbucks people? Is that how that works?
No, pretty interchangeable, actually.
Yeah, there's like two on every corner practically because there's a Starbucks right down the road from here.
Yeah.
I'm a Starbucks guy.
I know in Boston you can't do Starbucks. You got to do D&D.
Oh, yeah.
No, D&D, that was last time.
That was last
Oh, yeah.
That was last week's.
That's right. Yeah, but I'm more of a Starbucks guy. Nathan, you're more of you'd say a Dunkin' Donuts guy, correct?
Yeah, because I grew up with it.
Yeah.
So Nathan's more of a plebeian, and you're more of kind of a sophisticated man of the world.
Yes, I'd say that. Yeah, I mean, you could call him. I'd call you, brother, a Philistine. Is it wrong to call you an uncircumcised Philistine?
Yeah. I was going to say, I think sophisticated douchebag is the right term for Starbucks.
Yeah, that's right, man. We prefer D-bag.
That's right.
It's just a little more bougie.
A little more kosher.
Right. Well, this podcast is going down fast since I joined. Yeah.
What won't they say?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, we do have a great topic we want to talk about with Greg, but before we get into that, we do want to shout out to Missional Wear. And, I want to throw this out there that, if Missional Wear had a review section, they would always get a 5-star review for all of their great products that they have. I was just on their website last night. So, Zach, last week's podcast we recorded on Sunday night. We're recording this week's podcast the next day on Monday, and I was just going on their website and looking at their news section, and they have that great Spurgeon T-shirt about the beards. And I know, Zach, that you don't have a beard, and I'm just curious: is that why is that? You're strong Reformed Baptist guy, and so is it just out of rebellion or? What is the reason?
Or he's unregenerate?
I feel like there are a couple of reasons to grow a beard. There's it fits your ethos for real, like John Calvin or Jesus.
In that
I don't
order.
judge those guys. That's great. There are the guys where they're legitimately like tough lumberjack type guys, and they're a little annoyed that the growing of the beard recently or a few years ago it became popular for people with really soft hands. And then there are those people who are just ugly and trying to hide their ugly faces, like Joe Thorne. And I don't know if you guys have seen me, but you don't want to hide this mug.
No, man.
Hide these baby cheeks. I mean, come on. This is grade A face over here. So
it's too good, man. It's too good. I often
also,
Zach, I've been told you have the perfect face for audio podcasting. So
That's a dad joke.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's a dad joke, man.
There's also the small matter that when I grow a beard, it comes in looking, how you say, really patchy and kind of like a teenager trying to grow a beard.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, either way, you definitely have to check out Missional Wear and grab up some of their great products. Now, Greg,
Wait a minute. Did you highlight that one that they wanted us to? The Nadia Bolz-Weber poster?
Dude, I'm like the nerd kid at the other table, missing out on what the cool kids are talking about.
It's the Nadia. It's like a Peter Voth did like a illustration of Nadia Bolz-Weber in her like sleeveless clerical shirt, like glaring at the person looking at the poster, and then it's just all like F words that have been redacted.
Oh my goodness!
No, I missed that one.
Dude, see, Zach, I don't know how to put our minds on heavenly things, so
right.
You know, we don't really have anything to do with the unfruitful deeds of darkness. So, let me rephrase. Nathan does.
I was going to say, Greg, I don't know about that. So we gave Missional Wear a 5-star review.
Yeah.
You recently got a 1-star review.
Yes. Yes.
And so, Greg, I want you to tell us about that traumatizing experience, because the whole story just deserves to be put out there.
Yeah.
Because this same day that this woman gives your book a 1-star review, she gives another product a 5-star review.
Yes.
So, Greg, tell us about that.
I'm sure, Zach, you will feel this pain as a much more accomplished author than I am. My buddy Mike Shive, his father, Dave, has been on the podcast a few times, sent an email out this week to a random group of people. He said, provided without comment. And it was just a screenshot that basically showed user Tiff on Amazon, the same day she gave my book, Killing Calvinism, a 1-star review. He must have gone into her profile and seen she gave a 5-star review of a plastic toilet seat. So the 1-star review is just this beautifully dismissive, eviscerating comment. I mean, it really was. I have to say, she didn't attack me personally. She just said what she thought of the book, and obviously was not a big fan, as is her right to do. But the fact that the plastic toilet seat, she went on and said it was literally the best she's ever used. Yeah, that was a good moment. People can look that up and see it themselves. So.
You know how people will put, like, I wish I could give less than 1 star?
Right.
That's how you effectively do that, right? You put the 5-star in the toilet seat.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, literally, same day. So, obviously, both subjects were on her mind. And you're exactly right, Zach. The comparison speaks for itself. So,
well, what, if you don't mind my asking, were her major critiques of your? I have Killing Calvin. That's a Cruciform Press book, right?
That is. She.
Yeah, I read that. It's not a 1-star. That's like a 2 at the very least.
Exactly. Zach's like, now wait a minute. When I was Tiff and adopted that persona, I put this. Yeah, it was. What was it? I should have pulled that out for this podcast, but it basically just said a friend of hers recommended to it. And you know how that goes. She read the first chapter, and I think her comment was, "Books like these are a dime a dozen. Just the author sharing his opinion, no reference to scripture." And that sort of thing. And she said, so I just threw it away.
Which, I mean, in all fairness, wasn't that like the setup for your book to begin with? This is my experience with Calvinism.
It wasn't intended to be expositional or anything like that. But hey, I get it. You know, she probably wanted a stronger, polemic at the beginning or something like that, and did not win over that. But it's all right, Zach, because my mother bought 2 copies.
Nice.
Never read them. But they are propping up 2 coffee tables in her house, so I feel loved just by that.
Did you say that Tiff borrowed it from a friend, didn't like the first chapter, and threw it away?
Oh, is that what it said? That she borrowed it?
That sounds like a bad friend.
Yeah.
I didn't like that thing you loaned me, so I threw it in the trash.
That is so good. And see, only in real time, does Zach pull that up and can find the information verifying the account. But yeah, it is fun sometimes to just go through and read those 1-star reviews. Is that something you guys have done, Zach? Feel like maybe the guys on Happy Rant have done that.
On the Gut Check podcast, Ted and I used to go through and like each week read a 1-star review of one of our books.
Yes,
and
that's right.
He couldn't handle it, like psychically. Yeah. He was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not fun. Dude, with my book, Playing Saint, I was braced for like everybody who loved Osteen to like pile on me, and for me to have like 10,000 1-stars from people who didn't even read it because they were tweeting about it. And I was like, you know what? That's fine. I can leverage that into free publicity.
Exactly.
And I only got one of those. Someone who was like, I like Joyce Meyer, and this seems to be about people like her. And I was like, dang it!
Wow. Only one. Nathan, we need to adopt our personas and go on. Yeah, but wait. In order to do that, I'd have to start reading Zach's books. I gotta contemplate that, brother. But I'll think about it.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
If Nathan can find where he put the login information for that TIFF account.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, check it out, listeners. All love to TIFF. I mean that seriously. I know books do not speak to everybody equally. That is for sure. So.
Oh man. So on a maybe more serious note, I don't know how much more serious we're going to get, but
probably not much more. We'll try.
Zach, I know this topic is more up your level and speed, being a pastor and the importance of taking a sabbatical, an extended rest period where you have an opportunity to kind of recharge your batteries, do a little bit more personal study where you're not necessarily fully, preparing sermons week after week, but you're doing more introspective study for yourself in the Word. Not giving the sermon to others, or maybe even at times you're planning. You're going to be coming back, within several weeks or even months, as the case might be, and so you're kind of getting an outline and a schedule ready for when you do come back of things that you want to do and those things. And so I'm going to mainly turn it over to you, Zach, and Greg to kind of talk about sabbaticals, and I'll kind of chime in every once in a while. And so, Greg, why don't you first go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what led you to taking this sabbatical, and then, Zach, I'll let you jump in after that.
Sure, man. Sure. Hey, do you have a cough button? Because I'm probably going to have to cough.
We'll just leave it in there.
Okay, ready? Here's the cough button. Excuse me.
Organic. That's organic, you guys.
That is authentic podcasting.
We have chewing and eating on this thing, and we have coughing.
You can really hear the phlegm rattle,
You can. That's scary. And the TMJ behind it to fill it out. Yeah. When I missed last week, guys, I'm telling you, I wasn't. It wasn't dog ate my homework. I was in a bad way last week, and this is just the residual. I went on a sabbatical from. Let's see, we are podcasting June of 2018. Sorry, guys, getting my bearings. And let's see, my last Sunday at church was January the 7th, so I guess it officially started January the 8th. And I returned the first Sunday in May. That was actually cool. I liked the way the elders did that because they had me return as a soft landing. I didn't preach that day. I got up and I shared just a little bit. It's great to be back. And it was just a neat day because it allowed Lisa and I just to interact with a bulk of the congregation. And they didn't want the last week of my sabbatical being to prep a sermon. So they said that way you come back, you got that full week. Now, probably, Zach, you know about this. I was mentally prepping a little. It's hard not to when you're excited to come back. So, it was about 4 months in a week or so. It was longer than I probably would have taken in a better circumstance. I would love to tell you guys that this was a sabbatical that was planned for 2 years. We had everything perfectly in place. To get very serious here for a second, Nathan, you knew some of this. I was hurting pretty badly from August of last year through December, pretty much through Christmas, I never slept more than 3 hours a night, any of those nights in those 4 months. Yeah, it was terrible. You know, I've had chronic insomnia for 20 years, but it really just was at a fever pitch. So, you know, I do pretty well, as you guys know, on adrenaline and coffee and all that. And I was able to do pretty much what needed to do, but it felt metal on metal in my soul, with very little brake pad at all. And I talked to the elders about it and just said, guys, I am not in a good place. It came up a little more suddenly than I would have liked it to. So they were great. You know, this was probably around Thanksgiving, beginning of December. They said, Greg, how far do you think you can limp? And I really wanted to get through Christmas. Mm-hmm. You know, we had a lot of things in place, and I said, yeah, I can certainly do that. So my sabbatical was largely of an emergency nature. I will tell you guys, in January, I was sitting there in our living room. One morning I dropped the kids off at school. You know, my oldest, Samantha's in college. So Lisa and I are just sitting there in the living room, and I told her, I said, what if I don't feel better? Like, what if I don't want to go back? And it was a fear. It was a genuine fear. I just felt, I didn't feel bitterness towards the church. I just felt nothing. I felt nothing at all. And I went to my medical doctor, who I've seen for, over 15 years. Told him I was tired of not sleeping, that it was really taking its toll. I didn't want to use some aids I've used in the past, like Lunesta and Ambien and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, that can become so addictive.
I've been there, man.
Oh, yeah, I have too, and that's brutal. So, I want to be open about this with you guys. I'm talking about it pretty much with everybody at church. He pretty much persuaded me, what I think I knew about myself and Lisa knew about myself, that I'd probably been living with some untreated depression for a long time, and I mean medicinally. So he put me on something, and I'll tell you what, guys, in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, Lisa said to me one morning, she goes, I think you slept last night pretty good, you know, and I said, yeah, do you think? And I would say by February I was sleeping 6-7 hours a night. I remember there was a night in March, for whatever reason I remember it was a Monday night into Tuesday morning, where I slept 8.5 hours. And I had not slept 8.5 hours for 15 years.
Wow.
Just incredible. And in all seriousness, guys, I feel like a totally new person. So mine was a little unique. It was largely related to sleep deprivation. I think some depression and anxiety was fueling that for a long time. But I got so used to living with that as my baseline norm,
right.
I didn't realize how bad it was.
Yeah.
You know, Lisa and I always give that example. I think I've used it on here before, Nathan. You come into your house, and there's this horrible smell. And I remember it happened years ago. I came in and said, Lisa, what is that? Is that like is that a dirty diaper or what was that? And she didn't smell it. And finally, after kind of, searching for it, there was a dish rag stuffed in the garbage disposal. It's just nasty and congealed crap, whatever was on it. And it was nauseating. I remember I threw it out, opened up the windows, aired it out. And, of course, Lisa never smelled it because she was in the house all day.
Right. And
you just don't notice it. It becomes, this imperceptible background. That's how it was for me. There's a lot of other great stuff that happened on the sabbatical. But and I was going to ask you, Zach, have you ever taken one?
I tried to.
Okay. I got to hear about the attempted sabbatical.
Well, yeah, but then I want to get back to your stuff, man. Holy cow!
Yeah.
When I'd been at Judson 7 years and was starting the year 8, I said, hey, if I'm going to take a sabbatical, now makes sense because I'm kind of a literal guy, literal hermeneutic.
Oh, right, of course.
So I guess it should have been the year 7 now that I think about it. It's supposed to be a sabbatical, 7th. And they were like, I don't know. My elder board. And I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, we don't know how we would handle that. We're not saying no, but we're not saying yes yet. Let us think about it and pray about it. And I got kind of like really defensive about that and got kind of mad about it. And then I wound up coming up with another plan where instead of taking extended time off as a sabbatical, I would like for that whole year have like a weekly sabbatical in addition to my day off. Yeah. There's a place up here in Michigan called St. Francis Retreat Center. It's about 10 minutes from my house. It's run by the Franciscan order, but it's ecumenical. Yeah. And it's gorgeous.
Wow.
And so every week for a day, I actually went up, and the idea was I'd be up there praying, reading the scriptures. The problem, of course, was that since I was still on, I had as much work to do.
Of course.
In a week, and it just basically made the rest of the week more stressful. So I did it for about 4 months, and then I stopped.
I gotcha.
So I've been at my church almost 13 years now. Maybe when I get to year 14, I should say, then it definitely is time for this podcast.
Yes. I would say, Zach, let me just throw that out based on that story alone, Zach, that the concept of the sabbatical is just sort of, even for elder teams, and I'm not trying to villainize your team, Zach, or mine or anybody's, but it really is a lost art, and I think people are confused by it. I think it's a very natural reaction for guys that love their pastor, but they might think, well, gosh, I work hard. I don't get a sabbatical. I do this. I don't get this. And I think it needs more attention because what I learned, I probably needed a sabbatical. Yeah, Zach, like I would have loved to have had one after 7 years. I would have loved to address some of the things that weren't quite at DEFCON 5 when maybe they were at level 2, and I would have had the time to do it with some extended time off. I think often what happens with pastors, you're always on. Most pastors that really care about their church are constantly thinking about their church, praying about their church. So it's always sort of the mental symphony going on in your head. And then there's any moment somebody can get really sick, somebody can die, there's a church crisis. I always say, too, that, I think of somebody like my brother who works for T. Rowe Price. Mm-hmm. I don't know what he does. He's a brilliant dude. He's a network administrator / I don't know what he does. He's a smart guy. Works really hard. I would guess that if my brother developed some kind of shady hobby, I'll just say that in case children are listening, some kind of bad habit. If he shows up every Monday morning at 7 and puts in his job, they don't care. They don't care what his habits are. Pastors aren't paid for a job; they're paid for a life. Zach, as we know, you're paid to live a certain life. Your elders would care if you developed a bad habit, some sort of moral quagmire, that you were stuck in, and they should care. They have to care. So in a sense, I think that the pastor's life, not his tasks, not his job, is what the church should be most concerned about. Because there isn't this bifurcated, well, he does these tasks, and then we don't care what he does on his off time. Good church will care what he does on his off time and what kind of state he's in mentally. So, of course, my first announcement of that to the congregation is I had Steve Hartland, as Nathan came. Yep. He preached as a favor to me and did a pretty nice job sort of giving an apologetic for sabbaticals. So, but what you describe, Zach, is so interesting because, I've been in that spot where you're taking the day to personally retreat, and all that really means is that in the leftover time, you are squeezing in more and more work. It's always to me like when Memorial Day weekend came. I've been trying to be in the habit where I take off Fridays instead of Mondays. I heard a pastor say years ago It's like, what? I'm like most pastors. I'm depressed on Monday morning. I want to get paid for it. So, I thought, if I'm low and in a funk on Monday morning, and wishing I'd preached a far better sermon than I did the previous day, then on Friday is when I'm going to try to take my time. So, Memorial Day weekend comes and, you're quote-unquote off Monday. Nobody's at the church office, and I want to do stuff with the kids and everything. All that means is your week just gets condensed into those other days. It's not like the needs change.
Right.
Your role changes. So, anyway, Zach, I hope you do get a sabbatical at some point, brother, because as you can imagine, I'm a big believer in them more than I ever have been.
I really felt silly asking for it because, there are people on my elder board is it's 5 men and 5 women because we're godless liberals, and there are CPAs. I've got a guy who works for the state of Michigan who probably works 70 hours a week.
Sure.
And is always, on the verge of being burned out, but is just, carrying on. And to come before them, and I said, I'm not burned out. This isn't, I'm not trying to tell you this has to happen now. And so I undersold it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I came in there with I didn't want to be hat in hand. And I said, I think this would be good for me, which means, it'd be good for the church.
Yeah.
And they didn't even say no. They kind of said, let us think about it. And I kind of, felt like, well, maybe I shouldn't have asked for it, and came up with this half measure.
Yeah.
Which, I guess I thought it would work. I really did. Maybe, and because it was a situation where I had somebody that's a licensed minister on my board cover for me on that day. So if someone was rushed to the hospital, I still would have my day.
Sure.
Somebody else would go and do the visitation and stuff. But like you say, there's everything else that needs to get done. And I've got all sorts of stupid stuff I probably shouldn't be doing, like updating the website with my sermon each week and stuff. The stuff I don't delegate. And excuse me, I'm not choked up. I'm just like dying over here. So yeah, it felt like, looking back, I think I felt like I didn't deserve it, and that was reflected in the way I asked for it, and made them. If I had come in and said, I'm at a breaking point, I know they would have supported me.
Sure,
I know they would.
Of course. Of course.
Maybe not with 4.5 months. That's very kind of them. Yeah. And you obviously have really good people. I do too. I'm not saying I don't, but that's it's just a different animal, I think, when you come in and say this is needed, and because people could probably sense you were going to have to maybe leave the pastorate, or they weren't going to have Pastor Greg to kick around anymore if it didn't do something.
Yeah, I think in the way it played out, you might know this, Nathan, more as as an insider view. I think it probably surprised some people. It was pretty sudden in its announcement, so we didn't say too much in terms of the reason why. Again, Steve's sort of homiletical cover was, "Hey, pastors should get sabbaticals,
right?
When they can." And I remember he went to sort of the academic tradition, and how professors historically, got this time, and he talked about sort of the mental energy that's put out in, by most pastors, certainly teaching pastors, and I think again there was some confusion. Yeah, there were a lot of people that I think were wondering maybe what was going on, and to be honest, Zach, I wouldn't have had much to say. January was a very fuzzy time for me, even looking back just 6 months ago. I was a little nervous myself. I just held on to the hope that some of my joy would return. Again, like I said, I never felt embittered toward the church, like they had wronged me or done anything. I knew that it was probably something internally off and broken. And it was clearly, so much of it, guys, was just related to the sleeplessness. Yeah. My doctor actually said he was surprised that I wasn't hallucinating. He said that that sort of prolonged lack of sleep can do some real damage. But I was seeing floaters all the time. Yep. Just got so used to them, which we all get from time to time. But apparently there's some relationship between sleep deprivation and goofy stuff going on in your vision. And it was just brutal. and sleeping again. See, now that even today, dude, I woke up, was excited to come here, but I woke up, and because I'm appreciating sleep, oh man, I would love to get another half hour of sleep,
right?
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I did want to mention that happened to me that was very helpful, and Zach, chime in as you wish, because I don't know how you would feel about this. Years ago, I don't know, it was D.A. Carson. I was at a conference somewhere, and I feel like it was Carson or one of those type of guys, Keller or somebody, that was talking about the pastor's personal devotional life, and that, hey, you can use your sermon material, your devotional material, your teaching material, whatever you're doing that week for a sermon or elders meeting, and it should be able to be your kind of personal catalyst for your own spiritual growth as well. In other words, they were whoever was mentioning this was emphasizing you don't need to kill yourself by adding another set of texts to study, for your own benefit. So I had been operating that way for a long time, where my personal devotional life was pretty much what I was teaching and preaching, which I think is fine. I don't think there's any "thus saith the Lord" on this. And then Dave Shive, he's one of the few guys I met with regularly. I met with he and Heartland almost alternating weeks throughout the sabbatical. They're just very helpful, older guys, seasoned pastors. And Dave asked me one time, we're at Chili's, not far from here, Nathan, over in White Marsh, and over a chicken salad, he just asked me, well, Greg, lay it on me, man. What's your personal quiet time devotional life like? And I said, it kind of sucks. It has become for me. I told him, I said, Dave, I suspect that I don't read the Bible anymore without immediately thinking how I'm going to turn this into a sermon outline, a topic.
Yeah.
I said, I just don't think I do it anymore. And he urged me, Zach. It was really cool. He kind of pulls out his little old school journal. Dave's a big prayer journal guy and all that. And I told him that I was honest. I said, Dave, I'm just going to let you know, man, I'm not doing a prayer journal. I said, I have started those 20 times over the last 30 years. And he laughed. He goes, no, I'm not asking you to do a prayer journal. I'm going to ask you to do something else and see if you want to. And he basically showed me that he had been in the Gospel of Mark for several months at that point. He was still in chapter 1. He goes, I have no agenda. He says, I'm just kind of reading it. I'm jotting things down. I'm not teaching any of this stuff. He urged me to pick a book of Scripture and just linger on it for a long time. So I took John. I just took John's Gospel. Like a lot of Christians, it's the first book I read. That's what everybody told me to read, and kind of a honeymoon period of my life. So, Zach, I'll tell you, man, you can probably get this. Those first 2 weeks, it deepened my depression because
really,
well, I'm reading John. I'm in John 1:1, and I'm trying, and I'm writing stuff down, and I'm immediately just thinking how I would teach it or what I would call attention to, and it's almost like my hand is reaching for the laptop or the pen, and I'm thinking what I would do with it. And I remember wanting to call Dave and to scream at him. This is killing me. I can't do this. And, the thing I didn't mention is Dave urged me, he said, Greg, why don't you make a commitment? And I'll hold you accountable to it. He said that you don't teach on the Gospel of John for 3 years. That way it's kind of a commitment you've made. And
it's your book that you're studying just for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And because if I know I'm going to teach it in 3 months or 6 months or a year, okay, I can put this on the shelf and make some outlines. So it kind of forced the issue. I'd say after about 2 weeks, I can't say I had some dramatic moment. I don't remember. I just remember thinking, wow, this is like the first time in a long time that this is just for me.
Yeah.
So I started that in January, and I'm in chapter 2 now. Guys, and knowing I'm not doing anything with John for the longest time. For me, Zach, I'll say it really helped. It kind of rekindled a fire that was ebbing pretty low.
Are you not allowed to reference like a verse or a small passage from John in a? I mean, are there loopholes here?
Yes, there. Well, I hope so. It's pretty much up to me. Well, it's interesting that when I came back, as you know, Nathan, in May, I'm doing a series called Just Jesus, where I'm going to do it through the summer, and every week I'm taking a New Testament book and just kind of giving the portrait that book gives of Jesus. You know, so I did Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then when I got to John, or I would have gotten to John the fourth week, I told the congregation, rather than giving one big boring sabbatical update, I would spoon feed them some info, along the way, and just give it to them piecemeal. And I just mentioned that, and I got a lot of response from that. A lot of people came up and said very encouraging things that I just told them, guys, I had professionalized my devotional life, and Dave was gracious as a teaching pastor. It's an occupational hazard for all of us, and I said, so I'm not teaching John. I said, so guys, 3 years from now, 2021, I said, somebody remind me to go back when everybody's forgotten about this sermon series, including me. Remind me to teach what does the Gospel of John say about Jesus on a one-off message. And there's a few people that have written it down the day I said it and said, I'm coming to you on May 15th, 2021. And, of course, by then, the premillennial rapture, pre-trib will maybe have occurred because
You'll still be here, man.
Oh, dude, I walked into that buzzsaw, man. Bartles had that buzzsaw going the moment I started that. Just said, I'm waiting. Here he comes. So, but and Zach, can I ask you, how do you approach your reading, your devotional life? Do you try to make some separation? Look, I can tell you're probably at a much better place than I certainly was. You might be able to do it where your quote unquote occupational material can double as your personal.
Yeah, man, I'm in such a better place than you. It's not even.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
What's funny is that I kind of went through the same I remember seminary professors insisting you got to have additional stuff, and me coming to the point one day where I've been hearing from homiletics professors, this stuff has to have an impact on you. You got to preach it to yourself first,
right,
before you can really, preach it to anybody else. And so I'm thinking like I've got, there's more than one element to this. I'm not just like pawing through some commentaries and making notes on the Greek and then giving it directly to the people. So I am benefiting, but more lately I have been actually reading through the Psalms, and I have to forbid myself from going to the original language if I'm going to, because I'll get really curious really quick.
Right.
And especially in the New Testament, where I'm like, I bet I know what that Greek word is, and that would be so. You got to just keep myself from doing certain things.
Wow.
That will cause me to, and especially with a narrative book like John, you can appreciate the story a heck of a lot more if you read through it without, dissecting it.
You're so true. That's exactly right.
You're reading through it like the original recipients of this thing.
Yeah.
Just reading it going, wow, or an unbeliever who's handed a Gospel of John and it's like, oh my gosh, what happens next? I know he dies on a cross, but I mean, I don't know all the details.
Yeah.
And you almost get to appreciate the story anew when you're not looking at it like, it's like, I know there aren't kids listening to this, so it's like why I would never want to be a no, I don't want to say it. Well, yeah, all right. Why I would never want to be a gynecologist, man.
Hey, we're back to the what won't they say?
That's right.
Yes.
No, let me say this. It's like why I never want to learn all about birds. Like everybody's like, look, a pileated whatever, and I'm like, no. I just want to see pretty birds. That's the thing. And I have the burden of knowing what kind of parallelism is being used in the Psalms.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I can't really keep my mind from clicking. Oh, there's the chiasm. Oh, there's
yes, of course, of course.
But oh well. I mean, I make myself focus on the content of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, God can speak through both. I'm not saying He can't.
Of course.
But the real trick would be you keep the prayer journal, but really the prayer journal is prayers that are like Dear Lord, I noticed in John 3:14. I started keeping a prayer journal once, and I don't know how you feel about this, but God speaking to people. I mean, I don't know how much of a cessationist you are, but God, in the midst of that, spoke audibly to me and was like, "Buddy, that is a diary, whatever you call it."
Wow. Wow.
So I stopped. He was like, "What are you, some kind of Nancy boy? Why don't you get a little lock and key for that thing?"
Are you sure that wasn't Reverend James King that said that to you?
The two, I conflate the two so frequently.
Oh, some great stuff there, Zach. You are so right. It's hard to shut it down. Come on. I mean, every time you hear a sermon, Zach, I'm sure you're like I do. You almost can't help but think, okay, yeah, you might even like it. The guy speaking to you, it's really open up. You think, how would I have approached that? Oh, I would have emphasized this. It's hard to turn your mind off because it's like anything.
How can I
it's what you
steal
do.
that, right?
Right, exactly. How can I steal that? And hopefully this guy doesn't post his messages to the internet where people find out. Again, I keep hoping somewhere. Here's an idea for a book, Zach, for you, that some preacher finds a brilliant other preacher who has never posted anything online. And he just combs the church directory of the nation, finally finds some little obscure church in Iowa that has this golden mouth preacher, and I'm sure that'll sell a lot of copies. But in my mind, I thought
I was going to have to kill him or something.
Right. Well, actually, you might. You might have to make sure he preaches his last sermon on the series that gives you enough to take you through your retirement. Then kill him, and then will anybody find out because they can't Google check it and stuff? See,
there it is.
These are the things I was thinking of when I wasn't sleeping, and why I needed to go on a sabbatical.
Pastor, maybe.
Right? Yeah, an Amish pastor. I remember hearing a comic called Last Comic Standing one time. Dude, his entire routine, it was almost uncovered, which is eviscerating Amish people. And the very last thing he says, he goes, "Hey, you know why I love busting on the Amish? Because they're never going to know."
Yeah, that was Brad Stein.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I think that was Brad Stein. Yeah,
Brad Stein, who used to be one of my favorite comedians, and then he turned into just another shouting head on Fox News. And I was like, oh, remember when you were funny?
Right. Yeah, that's so true, dude. That does capture his career arc there for sure.
Hey, Greg, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Vis-a-vis your experience here. The taking of antidepressants.
Yeah.
Why don't you trust God? I mean, why are you clearly showing a lack of faith?
Yes. Well, I think you just answered it, man. No. Great setup there, Zach. I feel did we ever do a podcast, dude? I know we did some on depression.
When we did Zach Eswine, Spurgeon's Sorrows.
Oh yeah,
when we had him on, we talked a little bit about it, but I don't know that we ever got specific into medication.
Into medications,
like
and I feel Heartland was talking about it one time in some other capacity. But to Zach's question, yes, that is. I mean, I'll say this, Zach. I actually tried some antidepressants maybe 10 years ago. Runs in my family. Some anxiety, some depression. And the reason I know that is when I'm having a really good day, circumstantially, but something just is off, is, kind of when you're like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm feeling good physically.
Yeah.
There's no real crisis going on. Lisa's good. The kids are good. Why is there this kind of cloud in this darkness? So, I'll just say this: it runs in my family, and it's a very generational thing. So early on, I was pretty comfortable with an integrated approach. Pastorally, I've told people this for years. I said, okay, if you're starving, if you're hungry. But you've got a major crisis going on. Why don't you go get something to eat first? No, it's not going to solve the crisis, but it's sure going to aid you in dealing with the crisis. So I try to make sure that folks know the pill, the prescription, is not Jesus.
Right.
It's not, you're going to take this, hey, and all of a sudden my problems are going to be gone.
Right.
But if it better positions you to think a little more clearly, to be a little more grounded, a little more centered, so that you are exercising your faith, you're reading Scripture, you're getting the counsel of other Christians in your life. That's the way I've kind of approached it. So on a personal level, Zach, for me, I tried it years ago. I took two things over the course of a year, and both did nothing except make me feel worse. And just remember, one made me really nauseated and headachy. The other just seemed to just make me, agitated, and so I just forget this. So pragmatically speaking, I was a Jay Adams on steroids guy. That I was, I would have intellectually, theoretically said, yeah, there's a place for medication. But because my own experience was so bad with it, I just said, forget it. I'm not going to do it. And so when my doctor talked to me about it in January, he knows. I said, I know him on a first name basis. I've seen him so long. His name's Carl, and I said, Carl, I don't know. I've got a lot of apprehensions about this. And he said, I understand. He said, he said, why don't we try it for about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And he had me check back in. I've got a portal. I mean, I was emailing him every day. He's been a great doctor to me. So my thought on that, Zach, is, of course, that the fall has affected, I wear prescription glasses.
Right.
So that's what I would say. Often when people do the, you should trust the Lord thing, I always look to see if they're wearing glasses. And I said, well, you should trust the Lord. I mean, what do you need that corrective pair of lenses, when the Lord is here? So I say that why wouldn't the fall have affected things that I don't understand, brain chemistry and things of that nature. So, but I have to say, Zach, I think the question is good because I'm constantly asking myself, what if I didn't have this? Am I off the hook? Am I not responsible? What about Spurgeon, who didn't have anything like this, who I personally think would have benefited from it, based on, Zach Eswine convinced me of that when we interviewed him.
I think there's a tendency for people to romanticize the depression of long dead men. Like Luther so often couldn't get out of bed. He was so depressed.
Yes.
And they're like, yeah, but his wife came and cheered him up, and that helped his marriage, and then he recognized his need for God more. And it's like, dude, he could have accomplished probably far more had he not been saddled with this thing that literally sits in your mind and takes up space and drags you down. I heard a preacher sat in the pew while a preacher stood up there, and I was helpless to stop. He opens his sermon with a folksy little sermon illustration about depression and pills.
Yeah.
And his whole Haddon Robinson big idea was, the only pill you need is the gospel.
Oh no! Dude.
Go home and throw the rest of your pills away was the subtext.
Wow.
And I'm going, this guy, I bet he just broke a law.
Yeah.
Or there should be one to keep that. I mean, what are you doing?
Wow.
And I've often equated it when people will talk about stuff like that with, if you break your leg, you get a cast, and because the broken bone is a problem, and I don't understand everything about it's synapses that aren't firing or something,
serotonin levels and all that stuff.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? But I like your glasses thing. It's far better because it's an ongoing thing that does a little corrective and makes a big difference.
Yeah.
That was well put. That's stolen.
Well, I stole it from somebody, Zach. I don't know who.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Some small timer with no podcast.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. No, that gospel. Yeah, it gets to the point. To go back to what you said earlier, Zach, about romanticizing it. I think I did that. Because you go and you hear the great message, the Sproul, and I'm not saying Sproul said anything negative about pills, but the Luther biography, and here I stand, could do no other, and you learn about Luther, you learn about these guys, and it's sort of like, wow, look at these guys. Or you read Piper's "The Swan Is Not Silent" series, and who's the dude? Cooper? I mean, it looks like Cowper, right? But William Cooper, that wrote "God Moves in Mysterious Ways, His Wonders to Perform." If I remember on that, listeners can check me. Reading Piper's book on that dude woke up one morning in London. It was foggy, with the intention to throw himself off the London Bridge, end his life. And then the fog is so thick, he's walking around the city, and can't find the bridge. And he walks and walks and walks. You can barely see 2 steps in front of him. He ends up in front of his own home. Sees his door, and just was so tired of walking, he went in and started writing that hymn. So here's a guy that, I believe, it's been a while since I read it, that Piper's take on him would have been the number one candidate today for somebody that may have benefited from this kind of treatment. I always say that, look, I definitely think there's probably some truth that we're probably a little too pill happy. You talk to people, like, man, I'm frustrated. Is there something that can help me with this? And you think, hey, I don't think that should be the first line of defense. But you've been at this for some time. You're doing everything you know how to do. Why wouldn't you seek some help? And I have no doubt 100 years from now, if the human race is still here, I'm sure they'll look back on this age we live in, and we'll have learned a lot and say, can you believe they used to do this when people had depression, anxiety? But it doesn't mean there's no value.
Right.
And I think, it varies a little doctor to doctor, person to person. Yeah. But, I think it is easy to romanticize, as you said, Zach, almost the depression. I bet it if you could see it lived out day to day, it looks a little less Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, and when we were talking to Eswine, I mean, he talked about, Spurgeon going up into his attic and just locking himself up there for days, and going through what he called his dark periods or
black
something.
Moods. I think might have been the term. Yeah.
And so when you think about that side of things, and Greg, from what you're talking, that's how you feel. Let me just crawl up into the attic, shut the door, and just everybody leave me alone for a few days.
Yeah.
Well, no, with Spurgeon, it's because it was like Winnie the Pooh. We got into the attic somehow, but he couldn't fit back out for a few days.
That's right.
The jars of honey are all up there.
And the honey pot up there. That's perfect, dude. I will say, dude, I mean, you talk about sermon prep. Alistair Begg told this at a conference years ago. I don't know if you've ever heard this, Zach. He said that Spurgeon went to bed on a Saturday night and he didn't have a sermon, because Spurgeon was able to pull that off. He didn't preach through books. I mean, the Treasury of David is his only real kind of sequential, we call expositional work. But he was always textual, and he preached on 1 Corinthians one week, Deuteronomy the next, and he's gone to bed, and he's got nothing to preach. And it's Sunday morning, and he woke up the next morning. He and his wife are having breakfast, and his wife hands him on some sheet of paper, basically a little outline, and that he had called it out in his sleep during the night. And I thought, so Zach, I mean, that's how you write your sermons, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I told Lisa that. She goes, people would not want to hear the things I heard you call out in the middle of the night.
Although, I don't know, man. Yeah. When I used to take Ambien, apparently my wife told me that I wouldn't remember these things. She would say that when I had Ambien in my system, I was incredibly formal.
Wow, really?
I would speak in a very formal way to her. And perhaps I could have come up with some really solid systematic theology in there. I don't know.
Dude, that's incredible. Because I thought when you were on Ambien, you tweet racist comments in the middle of the night. Oh, I'm sorry. That's something else. I'm sorry. I don't know what. I got sidetracked there. But, dude, I've taken Ambien, too, and things like that. I actually passed out one time from Ambien. For me, it just did not work. I mean, same thing. I don't remember, but it's when Ben was a baby. He was probably 2 or 3 months old, and I wasn't sleeping well then, so I was trying some Ambien, and Lisa just hears this huge thud, because it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning, and Ben woke up, and I went in to check on him. And fortunately, grace of God, I wasn't holding him. But I had no memory of it. I was on the floor. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, maybe it was something else, but she sure thought, stop taking this. This is strange. And, that was just, it varies from person to person.
Sure.
But we're talking a little more about depression than sabbaticals, but, they're certainly related. And I know our time is.
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, just kind of maybe try to bring it back around. I've been here listening to you guys talk, and obviously I haven't been a pastor, but I have jumped between, Zach, you were talking earlier about, your congregation and people, having these professional jobs that they work and things like that. And I've floated between that and being a teacher. Mm-hmm. And as a teacher, I get a built-in sabbatical every single summer. And so
rub it in, why don't you, buddy?
I know, right?
I know.
Just a little salt on the wound.
Yeah.
But I can tell you there is a huge difference between me going out and cutting down trees every day and working 12-hour days and sometimes 14-hour days and getting up and doing that 5 days a week, having my weekends, having my, typical 2 weeks off a year type of deal. There is a huge difference between that because I'm physically exhausted a lot, but I have the night to recharge and recover and then start over again.
Right.
Where as a teacher, I find myself not so much physically exhausted, but I am emotionally and mentally just spent and drained. Yeah. And there is no recovering from that except for a long period of time. Yeah. I mean, both my wife and I were talking. We were getting to the end of the year into May, and everything was just driving us absolutely nuts. And it's not – I mean, the students' attitudes change, but more so does my attitude.
Right.
And so the things that they're doing. And so – I can just from that perspective see the importance of pastors needing to take that time because you're in a position where you're dealing with things even more. I'm dealing with, 50 to 60 teenagers and their moods and hormones and their parents. But you guys, you're dealing with the families in the church. You're dealing with, the weddings, which are great highs, I would assume, but also the funerals, which are great lows. And so, the responsibility that the pastors have, I think, would demand sabbaticals and longer sabbaticals to recharge their batteries and come back in. So,
yeah.
Well, weddings are lows too, just so you know.
Well, yeah, that's true. Hey, Zach, I mean, we could do a podcast on that sometime, dude. Pastors' feelings on weddings. Weddings are what I like to call the weekend killers. Because whenever which is why I'm doing a few less.
Yeah,
we've tried to tighten up our policy a little bit because they are a lot. But just to say quickly here at the end, because I know we have to wrap it up. But I hope anybody listening, hey, maybe you're inclined to just start a conversation, not demanding anything, but maybe if your pastor's been at it for a long time. Hasn't had a break, and I'm with it. 4 months is a kind of a crazy long time. Mm-hmm. I think our church did very well. They covered it well. They got a lot of good guys to come in and speak, and Mark did a great job. Our XP kind of keeping everything steady, but probably worth a conversation. Yeah. It is. I think Zach said something earlier that is often lost. If it benefits the pastor. Mm-hmm. It should benefit the church.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm surprised that connection sometimes people need a little help making.
Sure.
I think they're willing to make it, but I think it's just
there's a foreign concept to that.
There's almost a firewall up between the two, and you have to kind of work a little bit to say, hey, this is going to be good for everybody involved.
Yeah.
It's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
Yeah. Well, Zach, I know that you've got to run up and pick up your boy there. He's coming into town for a few days to hang out with, so we're going to go ahead and let you get to him.
He just texted me, I'm so excited, I want to get black lung from all the cigars we smoke. That's Ted Cluck in a nutshell.
Hey, I got to ask, is Cluck still not doing the social media thing, Zach?
I don't. It's hard to say. He tweets as his movie that came out like a long time ago, and he talks about other people's tweets, but he's not on Twitter.
I got you. He's probably on in some stealth capacity We'll find that. I think he's Tiff, but we'll you ask Cluck if he's really Tiff. He's going to find out who that is. So good.
Oh, guys, great conversation. We're going to go ahead and sign off now. Gentlemen, we just rocked the Casbah.
These go to 11.